While I am and have gotten gray, I haven't really done it.
First thing you do is when we're taping, you have to say your name.
Okay, my name's Clayton Lewis.
Go.
And I'm normally at the University of Colorado and at the Coleman Institute for Cognitive Disabilities that I'll be talking about. As of right now, I've started a year at NIDER. I've been working at NIDER for part-time over the last year or so, but I'll be talking mainly from the University of Colorado perspective. So how did I was going to say that while I am getting gray or have gotten gray, it wasn't really in resonance. So I'm not an old timer, and I was going to check the date of when I did get into the field. I'm going to say it's on the order of 10 years ago, maybe a little less actually, but my phone isn't cooperating there. But anyway, how did I get in? It's very simple. So the Coleman Institute for Cognitive Disabilities was established at the University of Colorado about 10 years ago, roughly. And it was established with an amazing, enormous financial commitment from a wonderful couple, Bill and Claudia Coleman. And their aim was to create technology that would help people with cognitive disabilities, support their growth and development, support their increased independence. They had some experience with this at the family level of seeing that actually an old Apple II computer was they felt of enormous value to their niece who has a developmental disability. And they thought, well, if this thing that was designed with no thought to our niece's particular needs and interests is nevertheless so valuable to her, what could happen if we really focused on developing technology for her and people in a similar situation? So they got connected with the University of Colorado, and I had a little bit of involvement when they first connected with the university. So one of my classes was actually the occasion for kind of bringing Bill Coleman to the campus for the first time. I teach a course called Computer Science as a Field of Work and Study. I'm a computer science professor. And Bill came and talked about his life, including the founding, the founding of the Coleman Institute, or their dream of finding it, to my mostly freshman students. So I met Bill and later Claudia. But I wasn't much involved with it initially. And then sometime in there, I served a term as department chair, and shortly after my colleagues prudently voted me out of that position, I got a call from David Braddock, who was and is the director of the Coleman Institute, saying, "Gee, Clayton, would you come and get involved with the Coleman Institute?" So I knew a little bit about it. I had not worked in the field at all. But the timing was great because I had really shut down all my research activities, which were in other areas during the time I was department chair. So I was kind of at loose ends, and I'd been really interested and indeed inspired, as I'll say in a minute, by the Colemans, and so it looked like an opportunity, and I took it. Why were they interested in me as someone on the outside? Well, I don't know for sure, but some things I do know, and I can sort of piece them together, and they do relate to my thoughts on some of the other things on the list here. The Colemans both had careers in the high-tech industry, and they know a lot about that industry. And in particular, they know about the economics of it. So they know that the only reason all this wonderful stuff that we have is cheap is because people can sell a gajillion units of whatever it is. It's intrinsically expensive stuff, as a matter of fact, but it becomes cheap when it can be made in large quantities because it can be readily replicated. So this is something the Colemans have a very keen grasp of. So they recognize that if we're going to provide technology for people who need it, we've got to do as much as we can to shape mainstream technology so that it supports people's needs. In addition to, they certainly would agree that it's important to do more specialized stuff, but if we're really going to make stuff readily available to as many people as possible, we need that focus on mainstream technology. And I think as the Institute was developing, the Colemans and David Braddock felt that the Institute wasn't doing enough to kind of connect with mainstream technology. Well, earlier in my career, I spent a gig for about 10 years off and on with IBM. And I think the Colemans remembered that. And they said, you know, here we are working with all these academics. You know, they don't have a clue about what's happening out there in the real world. But wasn't there that one guy who had a real job? What was his name? You know, Clayton Lewis, something like that. So anyway, as I say, the timing was right. And I was happy to get involved with the Institute and have been. I'm on leave from the Institute now, working at NIDR, but that's been really important development for me. And I think we've had success, the Institute. And I guess one thing that's a reflection for me is that when I first got involved, supporting people with cognitive disabilities was not something that people always thought about doing. So if there were discussions of things like 508 regulations and all these things that are very important, you know, in the real big world there, cognitive disabilities weren't necessarily getting much attention. So I was very happy to be invited to meet with the HITAC committee that was working on the refresh of 508, 255, and other sorts of regulations, and really have a chance to talk with people about cognitive disabilities and the potential for doing things with technology there. And generally, it's quite striking that now, when people are talking about assistive technology, they're virtually always including cognitive disabilities in that conversation, which is terrific. So it's been great to have a chance to get involved there. Another thing that stood out on your kind of list of prompts here was people who are an inspiration. So I've mentioned Bill and Claudia Coleman, who are really inspiring people, both of them. Bill, if anybody listening to this has had a chance to hear Bill speak, he's one of these people who's a true visionary, an enormous optimist, which I think is hugely important. I guess I'll comment, that's something I appreciate about the ResNet community. There's so many really optimistic and positive people in this community, but Bill is certainly way up there. And then really through getting involved with the Institute, one of the people who's heavily connected there that I had a chance to work with was Kathy Bodine, who's another person that continues to be a huge inspiration for me. The organization that Kathy's built has so many wonderful people in it and is doing such terrific work. I had the privilege of getting involved in Kathy's RERC on advancing cognitive technologies, and that's been a hugely valuable experience. And it's really through that I first got involved with ResNet for the good old RERC row, coming to ResNet, being in the exhibit hall, meeting people, talking with people who came by. And another person I'll mention who's just a hero of mine is Paul Nishman. And I met him at ResNet. And actually, one of my regrets about having to step out from the RAIC for a while to do this stuff at NIDR is that I had the chance to work with Paul on some projects, and that really came from the fact that he walked up to our booth at ResNet, and there he is, this badge. It said somewhere here, "Do you have a short story?" So here's one. So it comes up as name, Paul Nishman, Nish. Well, I didn't know what Nish was, so I thought, okay, this must be his company that he's named after himself. So he explained that wasn't really quite the situation, but I've had the chance to work with Paul, and anybody who knows him knows what an extraordinary person he is, both in terms of his creativity and inventiveness, but just being a really interesting, wonderful person. So that's another person that I've met through ResNet in particular that's been great. Another person that, as far as I know, has not been so visible and active at ResNet, but certainly could be if she wasn't, booked 24/7 doing everything else in the world. And that's Yuta Treviranus. Yuta is another person, and in my mind, it's not an accident that Kathy and Yuta are both women. I mean, it's another thing I love about this field. There's so many terrific women who are leaders and very active in it. In my field of computer science, again, I've had the privilege of working with some wonderful women in that field, but they aren't as many. But anyway, Yuta is another wonderful person, and again, just a terrific optimist and doer who's accomplishing so much, and it's been a privilege for me working with her. And then Greg Vanderheiden, who's a male version of these people, and such a positive and energetic kind of person. Of course, Greg has been very influential in the RESNA community. I'm not sure he's meeting this year.
How many RESNA conferences have you been to?
Oh, several. Actually, through the RARC, I've been a pretty consistent attender, but I'd have to count up how long we've been doing that.
What keeps you coming back year after year?
Well, more than anything else, the people. Kathy's here. I see her fairly regularly, but again, in my present role, I don't see her. So having a chance to see her is great. I just ran into Marcia Shearer, another really inspirational person out there, so it's a chance to meet those people. I guess as I've gotten older, conferences are less about the sessions. But having said that, I was just in a really interesting session with Steve Simpson, Alec Cook, and some others about, robotics and kids with disabilities, and in particular, math education, and using robots to allow kids who can't manipulate manipulatives in math, to give them that opportunity to manipulate stuff. That's just such cool. It's cool things. I think every time I've been at a RESNA meeting, there's been something like that, one or more things, which is really a new.
You feel like you've learned something every year you come here?
Yeah, and and again, because I'm a newbie really in the field. Somebody coming from outside, it's particularly valuable in that way.
Great.
So I've probably used my 5 minutes.
Yeah.